They called me the lucky one, said I hit the jackpot with a beautiful young Filipina who loved me for who I was. What they didn't know was that love had a monthly subscription fee, and I was paying for an entire network I didn't even know existed. Sometimes the price of feeling wanted is everything you have left, and sometimes you don't realize you're bankrupt until the bill comes due. If our stories resonate with you, don't forget to like, comment, and tell us where you're watching from. This story was shared with us by a retired dock worker from Glasgow, who lost nearly everything before he understood what was really happening. I thought I was living the dream when I met Roslyn in that internet cafe in Cebu City. 70 years old, pension steady after 43 years working the docks in Glasgow, and suddenly this gorgeous 27-year-old was laughing at my jokes and holding my weathered hand like I was some kind of catch. The other customers would stare as she leaned into me, her long black hair falling across my shoulder, while I helped her navigate some website on the ancient computer. "You're so patient with me, Ian," she'd whisper, her accent making my name sound exotic somehow. Her friends would giggle and whisper in rapid Tagalog whenever they saw us together at the cafe, and Roslyn would translate with a shy smile that made my chest tight. "They say you're so lucky to have me, Ian. They can't believe such a handsome Scottish man chose me." I'd puff up like a peacock, buying rounds of soft drinks for her entire group, basking in their attention. But looking back now, watching that memory through different eyes, I think they were telling her how lucky she was, how lucky they all were. The way their eyes would light up when I pulled out my wallet, the way the conversations would suddenly include English words like generous and kind and helpful. I was so focused on feeling chosen that I missed the calculation behind their smiles. Roslyn would take my arm as we walked through the crowded streets of Cologne, past the jeepneys and street vendors, and I felt like I was starring in my own romantic movie. "My friends think you're like a prince, Ian," she'd say, squeezing my bicep that had gone soft in retirement. "They say Filipino women are so lucky when they find a good foreign man." The word good should have been my first clue, but at 70, when your wife of 30 years has been dead for 2, and your own children barely call except on holidays, being called good by a beautiful young woman feels like salvation. 3 months into our relationship, after I'd extended my tourist visa twice and was spending more time in Cebu than Glasgow, Roslyn started mentioning her phone problems. We'd be lying in her small apartment, the fan overhead barely moving the humid air, and she'd sigh dramatically while staring at her ancient Samsung. "My data is so slow, baby. I can't video call you when you're back in Glasgow. Sometimes it takes hours for my messages to send." The way she said it, with that little pout that made her look even younger, it felt like a problem I needed to solve. So I added her to my international plan, upgrading to the premium package that would give her unlimited data in the Philippines. The representative at the mobile shop in Glasgow acted like I was doing something perfectly normal. Supporting family abroad, Mr. McLeod. Very common these days, family. That word felt good coming from a stranger. Then it was her best friend Rika, who needed help with her phone bill because her overseas worker boyfriend had left her stranded. "Just this once, Ian. She's like my sister. Her baby needs formula, and she can't even call for work without phone credit." Rika was tiny and soft-spoken, always deferring to Roslyn in our group conversations. And when she cried telling me about her situation, something paternal awakened in me. "Please, Uncle Ian," she called me, and the title made me feel important in a way I hadn't experienced in years. Before I knew it, I was paying for 5 different Filipino phone plans, each one justified by circumstances that tugged at my heartstrings. Roslyn's cousin needed internet for her nursing studies. Her neighbor's daughter required phone credit to contact her OFW father in Dubai. Her former classmate was looking for work and needed mobile data for job applications. Somehow each monthly payment made me feel more connected to this community, more essential to their daily lives. "You're so generous, Ian," Roslyn would say, counting the prepaid load cards I'd buy during our trips to the mall. "This is why I love you. You have such a big heart for Filipino people." Roslyn introduced me to her extended family through video calls, and each conversation followed the same emotional script that I was too smitten to recognize as routine. Her mother, a tired-looking woman in her 50s with kind eyes, would appear on screen and speak rapid Tagalog before Roslyn would translate. "Mama says thank you for taking care of me, Ian. She says you're an angel sent by God." Then the conversation would shift to practical matters that somehow always involved technology. "Mama's phone is broken again, baby. She can't receive money transfers from my brother in Saudi Arabia without a working phone." Or, "My cousin Jenny needs load for her school research. She's studying to be a teacher, but the internet in the province is so expensive." Or, "Aunt Marie's data ran out and she's looking for work online. Just a small amount, maybe 500 pesos. I started keeping a spiral notebook of all the phone numbers I was supporting, writing down names and relationships that became increasingly complex. Roslyn's family tree seemed to grow exponentially, branching out to include second cousins, godchildren, former classmates, and neighbors who had become like family through various hardships. 15 different phone plans across 3 mobile networks, 23 people whose monthly communication I was somehow responsible for. The numbers in my notebook started to blur together, but each one represented a story Roslyn had told me, usually involving education, overseas work, or family separation. When I mentioned the growing list to Roslyn during one of our evening walks along the Cebu harbor, she stopped and kissed my cheek with the kind of tenderness that made everything else disappear. "You're so generous, baby. This is why I love you. In Philippines, when you help one person, you help the whole community. You're not just my boyfriend, Ian. You're like a father to all of us." Father. The word hit me in a place I didn't know was still tender. My own daughter in Edinburgh called me twice a year and treated our conversations like obligations. But here was an entire community that needed me, depended on me, celebrated my presence in their lives. Back in Glasgow for Christmas, surrounded by the grey December drizzle and my daughter's polite but distant holiday visit, I decided to surprise Roslyn with extra data for the holidays. She'd been sending me photos of her family's preparations, and I wanted to make sure she could video call me on Christmas morning. When I called my mobile company to increase her plan, the young representative put me on hold for longer than usual. "Mr. MacLeod," he said when he returned, his voice careful and professional, "I need to verify which of the 37 lines you'd like to modify." 37. The number hung in the air like smoke, and for a moment I thought I'd misheard. "So I'm sorry, how many?" 37 active lines currently billing to your account, sir. All with Philippines roaming enabled. Would you like me to read the numbers? I sat in my empty living room, looking out at the shipyard where I'd spent most of my adult life, and listened to him recite phone numbers I didn't recognize. 37 different Filipino phone plans that I had somehow agreed to pay for without realizing the scope of what I'd committed to. My monthly mobile bill was $2,100, more than my entire pension, more than my rent and utilities combined. When the representative finished reading the list, he asked if I wanted to review the usage patterns. "Some of these lines are using quite a lot of data, Mr. MacLeod. International video calls, file downloads, streaming services. Would you like me to send you a detailed breakdown?" I hung up without answering, my hands shaking as I stared at the phone bill that had arrived that morning, but that I'd been too lazy to open. 23 pages of itemized charges for services I didn't understand, supporting people whose names I couldn't pronounce, in a network that had somehow grown beyond anything I'd intended to create. I called Roslyn immediately, my voice probably sharper than it had ever been with her. She answered on the first ring, cheerful and loving as always. "Ian, baby, I was just thinking about you. I can't wait for you to come back." But when I asked her about the phone bills, about the 37 lines, about the people I'd apparently been supporting without knowing their names, her voice changed. "Who are all these people, Rose? I'm paying for 37 phones and I don't even know who half of them are." The silence stretched across the Pacific, filled with the static of international connection, and something else I couldn't identify. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and defensive, like a child caught in a lie she didn't realize was wrong. "Their family, Ian, extended family. In Philippines, family is everything. When you help one person, you help everyone connected to them. I thought you understood this. But when I pressed for specific names and relationships, when I asked her to explain who exactly these 37 people were and how they were connected to her, she started crying. "You don't trust me anymore. You're questioning my family like we're criminals. Maybe you don't really love me, Ian. Maybe you just like feeling like a big man with your money. The guilt hit me harder than the anger, the way it always did when she cried. Here I was, questioning the woman I loved, making her feel bad for something that was probably just a cultural misunderstanding. Maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe this was just how families worked in the Philippines, and I was being a typical Western man, trying to apply my limited understanding to a culture I barely knew. I'm sorry, Rose, I just got scared when I saw the bill. I do love you. I just want to understand. Then trust me, Ian, trust that I would never hurt you. Trust that my family appreciates everything you do for us. Over the next week, while Roslyn sent me daily messages about missing me and counting down the days until my return, I started investigating on my own. I felt like a detective in my own life, calling some of the numbers on my bill and pretending to be from the mobile company conducting a customer satisfaction survey. The conversations were enlightening in ways I hadn't expected. Half of the people I spoke to didn't even know who Ian MacLeod was. They'd been told that some foreign benefactor was sponsoring community phones through a local program, something about supporting Filipino families with overseas connections. We're very grateful for the program, one woman told me in careful English. My daughter can call her father in Hong Kong now. We don't know the sponsor personally, but we pray for him every night. Another person, a man who sounded middle-aged, was more direct. The load comes from some foundation, we think. Our neighbor Roslyn coordinates it for our barangay. She's very connected, you know. Has contacts with international organizations. Foundation, international organizations. The words felt foreign in my mouth as I hung up the phone. Roslyn wasn't just taking my money to help her family and friends. She was running some kind of operation, using my credit card as her supply line and my generosity as her business model. But even as the evidence mounted, part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation. Maybe she was embarrassed about asking for help directly. Maybe she was trying to preserve my dignity by making it seem like organized charity instead of personal begging. Maybe I was overreacting to something that was actually quite sweet. A young woman trying to help her community while protecting her older boyfriend's feelings. I reached out to Rika, the best friend who had needed help with her phone bill after her boyfriend abandoned her. When I explained who I was, identifying myself as Roslyn's foreign boyfriend, she laughed nervously before catching herself. Oh, you're the British uncle. Roslyn said you were her sponsor for the phone cooperative. She's told us so much about your kindness. Uncle, not boyfriend, not fiancé, not partner. Uncle. The word echoed in my head as Rika continued talking, apparently relieved to finally meet the mysterious benefactor she'd heard so much about. Roslyn is so smart with business, you know. She told us about this program where foreign sponsors support local telecommunications for families. Very modern thinking. She makes sure the phone credits go to people who really need them, students, mothers, overseas workers' families. As Rika continued explaining the program, it became clear that Roslyn had created an entire narrative around my financial support. I wasn't her boyfriend helping his girlfriend's family. I was a benevolent foreign sponsor, participating in some kind of international development initiative. She makes a small coordinator fee, of course, Rika added casually. Someone has to manage all the applications and make sure the money goes to the right families. But mostly she does it from her good heart, you know. Coordinator fee. The phrase made my stomach drop. When I asked Rika how much Roslyn made from coordinating this program, she became evasive. I don't know the details, Uncle. Maybe you should ask her directly, but she's helping so many families. 20, 30, maybe more. She's very organized, keeps good records. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Rika calling me Uncle, about Roslyn making coordinator fees, about my role in a program I'd never agreed to participate in. I wasn't a boyfriend helping his girlfriend. I was a sponsor being managed by an intermediary who was apparently quite proud of her business skills. The truth unraveled like a cheap sweater once I started pulling the right threads. Over the next few days, I called more numbers from my bill, sometimes pretending to be from the phone company, sometimes just introducing myself honestly as the person paying for their service. The picture that emerged was of Roslyn as a telecommunications entrepreneur who had found the perfect business model, a generous foreign boyfriend with more money than sense. She was buying bulk data packages and phone credits using my money, then reselling smaller portions to friends, family, and neighbors at a markup. The math was actually quite impressive when I worked it out. I was sending her roughly 2,100 per month for 37 phone lines. But the actual cost of that much phone service in the Philippines was probably closer to 1,400. She was making about $50,000 a month, roughly 700's profit from my generosity, which was more than many college graduates earned in Cebu. Her friends weren't saying I was lucky to have her when they whispered in Tagalog. They were saying she was lucky to have found such an easy mark, such a willing participant in her telecommunications empire. I was funding her entire social circle's digital life while she built a business on my pension and my loneliness. The most painful part wasn't the money, though losing over $1,000 a month hurt plenty. It was realizing that every conversation we'd had about helping her family, every tearful explanation about Cousin Jenny's school research or Ate Marie's job search had been a sales pitch. Rosalyn wasn't my girlfriend who occasionally needed help with her community responsibilities. She was a businesswoman who had identified a market opportunity and exploited it with remarkable efficiency. I was her primary investor, her supply chain, and her marketing success story all rolled into one lonely Scottish pensioner who just wanted to feel needed. When I flew back to Cebu to confront her face-to-face, armed with printouts of phone bills and notes from my conversations with her family members, Rosalyn's attitude completely shifted. Gone was the sweet, shy girl who needed help with her phone bill. In her place was a composed young woman who looked at my evidence with the detached interest of someone reviewing a business proposal. "You think you're so smart, Ian. You gave me this money freely. I never forced you. I never lied about helping my family and friends." She was right, technically. Every phone line I'd paid for was for someone she knew, someone who was genuinely using the service. But when I said I was cutting off all the phone plans immediately, she got desperate in a way that revealed just how much her life had come to depend on my monthly contributions. "You can't do this to my family. They depend on these phones for work, for school, for staying connected with relatives overseas. You'll destroy their lives." The panic in her voice was real, and for a moment I felt the familiar guilt rising up. But then I looked at her differently, seeing her not as my vulnerable girlfriend, but as a business owner whose primary revenue stream was being threatened. "How much are you making from this, Rose? How much profit are you taking from each phone plan I pay for?" She didn't deny it, didn't even look ashamed. "I work hard coordinating everything, making sure the credits get distributed properly, handling problems, managing relationships. You think that work should be free?" When I asked how long she'd been planning to continue this arrangement, whether she'd ever intended to tell me the truth about her telecommunications business, she just stared at me. "You wanted to feel important, Ian. I made you feel important. You wanted a purpose, I gave you one. We both got what we needed." Rosalyn launched a full emotional assault after our confrontation, mobilizing every person on my phone bill to guilt me into continuing the payments. Her mother called me crying, speaking broken English through her tears. "Please, Ian, my family needs phone. My son in Saudi cannot call if no phone credit. Please don't abandon us." Her cousin Jenny sent me photos of her school assignments that required internet research, along with a handwritten letter in careful English. "Dear Uncle Ian, thank you for helping my education. Without internet, I cannot become teacher. My family prays for you every day." Rika messaged me saying her son couldn't contact his father overseas without the phone plan I was paying for, that I was breaking up families by taking away their communication. Even people I'd never heard of started contacting me directly, having somehow gotten my number, begging me to reconsider. "Sir Ian, I am single mother. My phone is only way I can find work. Please don't take away my future." The messages came in waves, each one designed to make me feel like a villain for cutting off financial support I'd never intended to provide in the first place. Everyone had become dependent on my money, and now I was the cruel foreigner abandoning them in their time of need. The guilt was suffocating, like trying to breathe underwater. These were real people with real needs, and I had somehow become responsible for their digital lives without ever agreeing to that responsibility. But I held firm, even as the messages continued for weeks. I changed my phone number, blocked social media accounts, and tried to ignore the growing pile of letters that arrived at my Glasgow address with Philippines postmarks. Each envelope contained another story of hardship, another family whose communication I was supposedly destroying, another appeal to my conscience and my wallet. On my last day in Cebu, I met with Roslyn one final time at the same internet cafe where we'd first met. She arrived dressed in business attire I'd never seen before, her hair pulled back professionally, looking every inch the entrepreneur she'd apparently always been. She dropped all pretense of being the vulnerable girl who needed my help. "You were lonely, Ian. I gave you companionship. You wanted to feel important. I made you feel needed. You wanted a family. I gave you 37 people who depended on you. We both got what we wanted." She wasn't wrong. But hearing it stated so coldly, like a business transaction being audited, broke something inside me that I didn't know was still whole. "Did you ever love me, Rose? Even a little bit?" She considered the question seriously, tilting her head the way she used to when I'd ask her opinion about restaurants or movies. "I cared about you, Ian. You were kind to me, generous with my family, patient with my English. But love?" She shrugged, not cruel but matter of fact. "Love is for people who have the luxury of not worrying about money. I have a family to support, a future to build. You have a pension and a house and choices I'll never have. We helped each other, but we were never equals." That last sentence hit me harder than anything else she'd said. We were never equals. I realized I hadn't just been paying for phone plans, or even for the illusion of love. I'd been paying for the feeling of being needed, essential, important to someone's survival. In my loneliness, I'd confused financial dependency with emotional connection, mistaken gratitude for affection, and convinced myself that being useful was the same as being loved. Back in Glasgow, sitting in my empty house with bills and bank statements spread across the kitchen table, I calculated the full damage of my 18-month relationship with Roslyn. 37 phone plans, 37,800 total, more than my annual pension, more than I'd spent on myself in the past 5 years combined. But the real cost wasn't financial, devastating as that was. It was the realization that I'd been so desperate for connection, so hungry for purpose after my wife's death, that I'd ignored every red flag that should have warned me away. The increasing bills that I'd never bothered to examine carefully. The vague explanations about family relationships that never quite made sense. The way Roslyn never seemed to know exactly who all these family members were when I asked specific questions. The way her friends looked at me like I was a walking ATM rather than a person. The way she'd seamlessly transitioned from girlfriend to business manager whenever money was discussed. I'd mistaken my own loneliness for love, my need to feel important for genuine connection. Roslyn had simply given me what I was buying, which wasn't romance or partnership, but the illusion of being essential to someone's life. The tragedy wasn't that she'd taken advantage of me. The tragedy was that I'd been so starved for meaning that I'd paid premium prices for synthetic purpose. I looked around my house at the photos of my late wife, at the Christmas cards from my daughter that felt more like obligations than expressions of love, and I understood why I'd been such an easy target. I wasn't just lonely. I was desperate to matter to someone, anyone, in a way that felt vital and immediate. I started attending a support group for older men who'd been financially exploited in online relationships, meeting every Thursday evening in the basement of a community center near the old shipyard. The stories were remarkably similar, like variations on a theme I was only now learning to recognize. Phone bills for extended families in the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand. Emergency medical expenses for relatives who didn't exist. Business opportunities that required foreign investment to help our girlfriends' communities. School fees for children who turned out to be significantly older than we'd been told. We'd all thought we were special, chosen, uniquely loved by women who appreciated us for our kindness and maturity. The group leader, a former police detective named Mr. Harrison, who'd lost his house to a romance scam in Thailand, told us the same thing every week. They didn't target you because you were stupid. They targeted you because you were kind, because you still believed in love, because you wanted to help. They don't prey on bad men, gentlemen. They prey on good men who are lonely enough to confuse gratitude with affection. The group helped, but it also made me realize how common my story was, how predictable my responses had been. There was even a term for what I'd experienced, the white knight syndrome, where older Western men became financially involved with younger women abroad through a combination of genuine desire to help and unconscious need to feel important. I wasn't unique. I wasn't special. I was a demographic, a target market, a business opportunity that had been efficiently exploited by someone who understood my psychological needs better than I did. 6 months later, as I write this story, I still get occasional messages from Rosalind and her network, updates about family members I'd helped, with photos of children supposedly attending school thanks to my generosity, requests for emergency phone credit when someone's father dies or mother gets sick or cousin needs to travel for work. Christmas greetings that sound warm and personal until I remember they're probably copy and pasted to multiple former sponsors. I delete them all now, but I understand something I didn't before about the nature of loneliness and vulnerability. I wasn't paying for phone plans. I wasn't even paying for sex or companionship, really. I was paying for the feeling of being important to someone, essential to their daily survival, needed in a way that transcended ordinary human connection. The tragedy isn't that Rosalind didn't love me the way I thought she did. The tragedy is that I'd forgotten how to love myself enough to recognize when I was being used as a solution to someone else's financial problems rather than valued as a human being worth knowing. These days my phone bill is $40 a month. Just me, one line, calling my daughter in Edinburgh every Sunday and texting the occasional photo to my old workmates from the shipyard. It's enough. It has to be enough, because the alternative is admitting that I'd rather be financially exploited than genuinely alone. And that's a truth I'm not ready to face again. I've learned to find purpose in smaller things, volunteering at the local food bank, helping neighbor kids with their homework, taking photography classes at the community college. None of it makes me feel as essential as supporting 37 phone lines across the Pacific, but it's real in a way that my relationship with Rosalind never was. And sometimes, when I'm honest with myself in the quiet hours before dawn, I admit that real is better than essential, even when real is lonelier than I ever imagined it could be.